And I believe people can hear us. Uh,
Yes.
James Shotwell, welcome. Thank you
Hi.
for coming on here. And I have my
Yes.
special, whoa, there. I have my special little Doing Good Matters for you in honor of
Mm-hmm.
your appearance because I really admire what you do. You help a lot of people. So, thank you for that because me being one, you've worked with a lot of my artists, and I'd love to have you, tell people who you are and what you do, and you do a lot of things. So,
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that introduction and kind words. Well, my name is James Shotwell. I am currently, my full time role is the Director of Marketing and Customer Engagement for Holix. We're a music promotional distribution platform. So we connect record labels and publicists with their contacts using customized, secure promo pages. It's really cool. Check it out, holix.com. And in addition to that, as an extension of that, rather, I do a whole lot of things that are about educating people and helping people who are either in music or have a passion about the music business, because my belief is that the best way to create a better industry for everybody is through education. So we use the Holix platform and the extension of it through our blogs and videos and podcasts to do just that. So we have a YouTube channel. It's called Music Biz, Music Biz, where pretty much every week we post videos about tips and tricks to navigate the modern music business, whether you're a professional or a musician. In fact, in January, we've done a video every single day, and it is
wow.
very tiring, and you can check that stuff out. We also have two podcasts, Inside Music, which runs every Wednesday, and then a limited series show called High Notes, which we drop in season. Season 2 is out now. It's 10 episodes long. There are 18 episodes between the two seasons, and that is a show about addiction and recovery in the music business. And then beyond that, I do a lot of freelance writing. I write for Alternative Press, Substream Magazine. I've previously done Rolling Stone and a whole bunch of other publications. And then I write bios for bands such as Islander and Can't Swim, Hot Mulligan, and more. So I'm pretty
Okay.
much just doing whatever I can for whoever wants to work with me. That's kind of my scattershot approach to being in the music industry.
Well, you did your work in having the panels of publicists that really inspired this. So
Mhm.
therefore, I reached out to you to be on as soon as I could, because you had me on yours, and we had a little round table, and it was so well done. I mean, you're an excellent host. So
Oh, thank you. I didn't even mention those. Yeah. So we do I sometimes I forget the things I do until I start to like list them out.
yeah.
Um I yeah, so we do a series that's called Holics Live. They are roundtable conversations with people in the music business. When we started, it was just publicists that use Holics, but we've kind of expanded recently. I did the management team from Bronson Limited, and last week we did the Rude Records team to celebrate their 20-year anniversary.
Oh
And we
wow.
hope to do a few more of these team specific ones moving forward because I like that. But the idea is all the way back to that basic education premise, which is just, get the smartest people that I can get a hold of together and then pick their brains for anybody that's trying to learn about it. Because, when I was coming up in the music business, what doesn't feel like 12, 15, 15 years ago, but is, I, uh,
Yeah.
I just had a conversation last night with my partner where I was saying, I never felt like I had a mentor. Like I felt like I worked with people that were smarter than me, but I never felt like I had like that, like what you think of in books, like somebody that like really shows the superhero the way of how to do the thing they want to do. I just worked with smart people and tried to soak in all their information. So I'm trying to create some virtual mentor opportunities along the way so that anybody that can't afford to or doesn't want to move to New York or LA can find a way to get that education and get that experience in.
Yeah. You're not in New York or LA, are you?
No, I am
Oh,
in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I have lived
wow.
in Boston and Minneapolis, but I do not care for New York City, and I like LA slightly more, but it's still pretty
Only
pretty low on
slight.
my list. Yeah, only the weather is nicer and they have In and Out. That's
That
the
is
only pro.
true. In and Out
Yeah,
Burger is
yeah.
definitely an advantage LA has over us.
Yeah, they have it in out, but New York has. I love the Natural History Museum. I love the
Right,
Met.
right.
so,
Yeah.
so you got those. That's all I got. That's all I got for the reasons that I like New York,
Well,
and the
once we're
people.
done with COVID, you'll have to come out and visit. Um, but yeah, I mean, we've worked together quite a bit, and you've inspired a lot of stuff I've done. And you mentor a lot of people, like whether you know it or
Mhm.
not. So yeah, I appreciate you so much and all the work you do. So I
Mm.
just, I wanted to let
Well,
everybody know how great you do. High Notes, did you like
mhm.
it's a podcast about addiction and recovery, right?
Yes.
Well, did you have a hard time getting people to open up for that?
Yeah, it's. I always tell people that the hardest part is getting somebody to agree to do the show. Doing the show is extremely easy because once somebody agrees to do it, then they know what they're in for, and it's like we can just kind of get into it. But the hardest part is always going to a publicist or a manager or even the artist themselves in some cases and being like, "Hey, I want to talk to you for like an hour about the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and we won't promote your music, but it
Yeah.
will help your music career." It's like the idea doesn't really. It's not something that's like easily packaged, and I always worry that like a publicist, especially if I'm not close with the publicist, that they hear the request and they just go, "You want them to? You want?" It's like clickbait type thing, and it's
Mm,
like no, no, no. It's like a we want to have an in-depth conversation about addiction and recovery, and I try to pick the people that we pitch based on how well I already know their story, because I feel
yeah.
like that sometimes helps more. Because it's like if I reach out to somebody that I have no familiarity with, I think it comes across a little bit more like gotcha journalism. But if it's somebody that I can be like, oh, I've written about this person,
Yeah.
I've interviewed them before, so this is like the logical next step to keep talking to this person.
And so I know who you've had on the podcast with me. I know
Mm-hmm.
we did, who did we do? We did Tommy Vex, didn't we?
We
That
did
was for
Tommy.
season one. And then
Mm-hmm.
season two, I know we had Amanda on it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and who else did we have? I forget. Craig.
Craig from Escape the Fate.
Craig. Yes, Craig
Yeah.
Knabbett from Escape the Fate. Who else have you had on that you had like particularly compelling conversations with?
Well, my personal favorite episodes are Anthony Green from Circus Survive. He's kind of the reason the show exists. It was in part his idea, which we can get into that in a second. And then beyond that, there are two kind of smaller artists that have surprisingly been consistently the most popular guests on the show, which my friend Haley Butters of the group Absent Father, and in the second that's first season. In the second season, my friend Eric Christopher of Hospital Bracelet. Both are non binary musicians who are on very small indie labels, but they are a really good example of a modern musician who is largely popular on social media. They are digital. Their success story is almost entirely digital.
Hmm.
So, in a world where they do something like this, as much as their fans are constantly tied to their Instagram or their Twitter or whatever it happens to be, they've never heard these artists speak at length about something so
Sure.
specifically. And I think that that resonates really well. Whereas even in the case of Craig, he's been with Escape the Fate for a decade. He was with Bless the Fall before that, and I've interviewed Craig myself like 5 times before now. There's just so much. There's so much content out there. Like if you want to hear Craig talk, you can hear Craig talk. But
You
if
can
you
go
want
on
to
his
hear these
Twitch and
artists,
hear him talk.
yeah, exactly. But if you want to really dig into it a little bit deeper with some of these young artists, I find that it works really well for the show, if only because they haven't had a lot of opportunities to do that yet in their career.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know if it didn't come from you, the offer, I might
Mm-hmm.
not have been into it. You know, like I might not have done it because I might not have trusted anyone else with these people. But you, I would trust with them. And do you have like similar? You're either friends with the artist or the publicist, right?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10. in both for Hospital Bracelet and Absent Father, I actually reached out to them on Twitter from my personal account and been like, I want to do this thing. I'm trying to think of who, the only one that I wasn't close with necessarily out the gate was Brian from Korn, and it just so happened that his PR, Ross Anderson, I think at the time, who I do know pretty well, but he's like one of, Ross is so successful that, like, are you friends with him, or are you just somebody that's on his
Yeah.
contact
Yeah.
list? um, he just happened to be promoting his wellness clinic at the time that he was opening. So it was one of those moments where like fate just happened to be like, oh, I have the perfect thing to promote what you want to promote.
Yeah.
And that worked out. But otherwise, across the board, I've either known the artist or somebody has recommended them to me. Thankfully, in the second season, and I'm hoping for the third season when we eventually start working on it, it's usually like the artist or the publicist now knows what we're doing, and so they want to recommend somebody else. So they'll be like, "Oh, you know who you should talk to, so and so," and
Oh, I'm
then I can
always
go to
going to
that
look out
person.
for new people for you to
Yeah,
interview on that podcast.
exactly, exactly. So people will be like, "Oh, I really, like I think Anthony from Circus Survive was like, oh, you know who you should talk to? You should talk to Bert from the U." So then the opportunity came up to talk to Bert, and we're like, "Okay, well, Bert, Anthony says you should do this show," and then we kind of have like the group aspect of it of like people want you to do this and people that have done it, so that we're going to treat it well and be respectful about the subject matter.
And how did you get Holics to back that? Like, because you're kind of a community minded guy, are they like you, or did it take some convincing, or how did that go?
Mm. So I started working on it in season one. I started working on in December of 2019, and then in January we did two kind of test runs of interviews. I was in LA and I had some friends that we didn't end up releasing the episodes due to some audio issues, but I did like a trial run with people that I knew that I could just be like, "Hey, let me talk to you about this for 45 minutes just to see like would it work? Like what is it, is it going to sound in real life what it sounds like in my head?"
Right.
And also just figuring out how to ask these questions. How do you talk to somebody that has done heroin but about doing heroin in a way that isn't like, again, gotcha journalism.
Sure.
So I ran those two and it was working out pretty well, and then I think we recorded, I don't remember who we recorded first for season one, but we knocked out like 3 or 4 episodes before I even brought it to the boss, because I was like I want to do this no matter what. And then as we got further along, I realized, well, it would be helpful if we could kind of tie it to something. And I need to spend a lot of time on this to get it right. So if I could somehow fold that into what I do at Holics, because our whole goal is education, and all of the artists that we had been lining up were using Holics to promote their music. So there's a little bit of brand synergy there.
Hmm.
And so I took it to the team kind of like a quarter of the way done with season one, and was like,
Mm.
listen, I've been working on this thing and I think it'd be perfect for the company, and I'd like to bring it into what we do. I think that there's an opportunity here for us to set ourselves further apart from our competition, but also we'd already started to get a lot of attention in Hypebot and ASCAP and CSAC newsletters. We'd been to South by Southwest and NAM and Music Biz and all these conferences, and I was like, people look to us as some kind of thought leader or influencer in the space of music business, education, and success. And what is synonymous with that, if not addiction and recovery? Because the downfall of the music business for so many people is that they get access to this world of hard partying and drugs and alcohol, and they lose themselves. So if we give them, like, let's find a way to address that through what we're already trying to do. And Matt, the founder of Holics, was like, I love it. What's it going to cost? And I was like, I don't think it's going to cost us anything. Man.
Right.
It's free to host a podcast. I'm already working on it. So I think we'll just do it and, see what comes of it. And he was
Yeah.
game. So we moved with it. And these days he asked me what we're working on. We had a meeting today or Monday, and he was actually wearing the High Notes sweatshirt. So he's a fan. I don't know if he
Oh,
listens to podcasts, but he enjoys what we're trying to accomplish.
that's wonderful. We actually have a question from a DJ that I know. And he says, I get new releases from young artists to play on my stream. There's more I would love to do for them. How could engaging with you help them? They're in Jamaica mainly, which is cool because he does like a great reggae set. He's a DJ. It's, yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, I
Mm.
think in one way, they could use Holics to distribute their music
Mhm.
to people because
Mhm.
it's really the game, the only game in town as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, that's the message that I like to that I like to promote. Yeah, no, I think using Holics is a great tool. I think it's great to recommend to people. They get a 1 month free trial. If it doesn't work, that's great. But the thing about Holics, most people promote their music using SoundCloud or Dropbox. That's like the two defaults. But they both have their issues, right? So the problem with Dropbox, in my mind, is one is streaming it is really rudimentary, and two, it's really ugly. Like it's pretty much just a white page with a link. In the case
Yeah.
of SoundCloud, while you get a little bit of it's a little bit nicer to look at, but it's mostly SoundCloud branding. You get your album art, but otherwise it says like SoundCloud this, SoundCloud Pro that, all this other distractions and buttons. And as far as analytics are concerned, all you really get is somebody somewhere listened to your music at some point in the last 24 hours. But with Holics, you can not only customize your page so that it's beautiful and it's something that people want to look at, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
but you also get these in-depth analytics. So if you send it to 20 people and 10 people listen to it, you know who those 10 people are. And furthermore, you know which songs each of them listen to and how many times they listen to it. And you can speak to this too, being from the world of PR, like knowing that funnel that you can create by being like, I cast this big net, here's all the people that responded, here's how many people really care about it, that's who I'm going to go after. Like that's the key to building a successful campaign.
And one of the ways I've used it in the past was, if I have a big interview day and my artist is doing a whole bunch of interviews, I want to make sure people have listened to the record before they talk to him. And
Mm-hmm.
if I don't see your name on Holics, having listened to the record, it doesn't move ahead, you know, because that's
Mm-hmm.
the kind of intel that PR people need. We need to know if they really listen to it because we don't want an embarrassing situation in an interview, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah, exactly. I've made the mistake. I often joke. I think in one of our recent panels, I made the joke that there was a time when I did an interview with somebody and I hadn't prepared for it accurately. And we were talking about the album. It was going pretty well. And then one of the tricks that I picked up early on as a journalist was, if you don't know what else to ask, pick a random song in the track list that isn't the single and just ask the story behind it, because 9 times out of 10, they haven't talked about track 7 yet. So you just pick a song and ask about it. But the
Yeah.
song I picked was the instrumental track, like the
Oh.
instrumental interlude. And I was just like, so what's the story behind this? And there's like a long pause. And the guy was like, well, that's the interlude. And it's 50 seconds long. And we just, like it was so clear that I didn't know what I was talking about. And then I had to like save face and recover. Um,
Oh
and
man.
I
What
probably wouldn't have gotten the opportunity if they knew that I had not listened to the record yet.
well, I also think we all make mistakes, and you
Hmm.
certainly have a lot to listen to on a regular basis.
That's
So
true.
do you get most of the music that you're serviced with on Holics? I think that would be kind of funny. Meta.
Yeah, it's two things happen. Sometimes, yes, I often joke that I get more promos than anybody else on Holics. So when we do testing for new developments, especially on the client side, the contact side, like the promo library and stuff, a good way to speed test the website is to have me load my promo library, because there's like 100 senders. But a lot of people also assume that I just have access to them. So sometimes, like recently, we did a partnership with Prosthetic Records where I've been doing video interviews with some of their upcoming artists that I really like. And I had to reach out to my friend Becky at Prosthetic and be like, hey, can you give me access to this Summoning the Lich album? I really want to listen to it. And there was this moment where she was like, can't you just give yourself access to the Summoning the Lich record? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I mean, no, you have to like take the steps to give it to me. But and also oddly enough, every time I do like meetings, when we can travel, I typically go to New York and LA and meet all of our clients. And every time I'm in a meeting, especially with the bigger labels, they're like, so just between us, can you just listen to everything? Which I assume they probably ask people at Spotify too. Like, do you just get access to everything as soon as it's shared with you? But the answer is no.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
very honest. um
Yeah, well, I would be less honest if the opposite were true, I guess. But it's the truth. I can't.
yeah.
There's no trickery to it. I have to ask for access.
One of our viewers wants to know, when you're interviewing someone, how do you respond when someone's uncomfortable with the topic or question?
Well, it depends. If it's a video interview, it's usually pretty obvious,
Mm,
just because you can read the body language. And so sometimes I'll pivot, but I try to be very attentive to, like, my whole approach to interviewing is try to always connect the dots, right? So if I know, like in the case of high notes, generally at some point I want to get to the worst day of your life, which is like the day before you get sober most of the time. Um, and it's really, you can't just start there. So
no.
usually we kind of it's about figuring out how to ease somebody into a level of comfort where you can ask them a very serious question. So in the example of high notes, every episode starts with how long have you been sober, and that answer usually dictates what the next question is. And
Sure.
sometimes we'll say, well, like, well, what happened the day that you decided to get sober? And usually, if it that wasn't like the worst day of their life, they'll reference it in that answer. They'll be like, so a couple weeks prior, I had done this, and this day I just realized I'd had enough. And it's like, okay, so in the back of my mind, I now know that there is some incident that we have not discussed yet that is probably like the thing that they would rather not talk about that we want to get to in this conversation. So we just keep going forward in the timeline. We'll be like, okay, so you made this decision. Who did you tell? What was the first meeting like? How were you feeling? And then once we've gotten to the point where now we're just talking like old friends. We aren't strangers on the internet. We're just having a conversation. Then you can kind of be like, oh, so just to go back for a second, you referenced this other thing. So what's the story there? And if they beat around the bush a little bit, sometimes you honestly you just have to move on. You have to be like, okay, well, maybe this conversation isn't going to be about the thing that I wanted it to be about. But, if you're able to establish a rapport, you will hopefully find something else to talk about. So, when I first started doing high notes, I thought every episode was going to have a pretty straightforward outline of like what we're going to talk about, what it's going to be, and like the kind of stories that we are going to share. But then as the show goes on and you actually start having these conversations, like some episodes, we barely talk about the addiction element of it at all. We talk all about the recovery. While in other cases, the person is very open about the addiction side, and we focus on that. It's about figuring out how to make the person comfortable, and then once they're comfortable, just kind of feel around conversationally with where they want to go. And 9 times out of 10, it's the thing that feels most natural. So if you are like talking and talking and talking and a question pops into your mind to ask, but you know that it's going to derail the conversation, or it's going to cause the flow of what you're doing to completely stop and adjust, you got to you got to find a way to work up to it. There are no hard and right or left turns in conversations. You got to kind of shift focus a little bit.
And you also have to be a person that has empathy and does their homework. And
Yeah.
like you and I were talking before we came on, there's a little bit of reciprocity there. Like the publicist has to do their homework to know what you like and how you operate.
Mhm.
And you have to do your homework on the artist and what they're promoting and what their kind of vibe is. So
Yeah.
it's equal amounts of, like, it's a lot of work on both ends, but it's a lot of
Mhm.
important work.
Yeah, and I think that there's nothing like better about an interview than when you like get into that groove of natural conversation, and then things like revelations start coming. And my the oldest trick in the book, it's not my trick, but something that I always use is I'm a pretty self-deprecating individual. So I'm not afraid to tell you something embarrassing or painfully true about myself if it motivates you to be more open with me. So, another example of if somebody is feeling uncomfortable talking about, in a recent episode in season 2, we have a guy who got arrested a few times before he ultimately ended up getting clean. And
Yeah.
every time it was because he had these like random run-ins with police when he had drugs on him. So as
Mm,
we start building up that conversation, I can tell that he's a little, it's weird to talk about being
mm.
arrested, obviously, and interacting with police. So I was like, I have stories about drugs and police in my life. So let me tell you mine. And for people that haven't heard high notes, you don't hear my half of the conversation. You just hear the answers, and then I narrate the show like after the interview. So I can be as open and honest as I want because I know that nobody's going to hear my half
Right.
of it other than the person that I'm talking to, which is the only person I need to hear it in order to get to the point of the conversation that I want to get to.
Well, when you were talking to Craig, I loved it
Hmm.
when you were talking about how you had interviewed him backstage and he made you do a
Hmm.
shot for every question. That,
Yeah.
that was the ultimate in connecting. And
Yes.
that
Yeah.
was very impressive to me. So,
Well, honestly, I would rather that kind of natural thing happen where I have a story about the person or about something that I think we're mutually interested in and it develops than to I've had assignments as a journalist where going into it, I know that we're doing the interview to talk about a very specific thing that otherwise you probably wouldn't bring up in a conversation. And that's way more awkward to me because there's something that feels very mechanical about it. Like I remember in 2010 or 11 for Alternative Press, I did an interview with the lead singer of the band Cute Is What We Aim For about having attempted suicide. So going into the conversation, I knew that at some point I had to get to, so you tried to kill yourself. And if it comes up naturally in a conversation or if there's other things that we're there to talk about and that, that's also part of it, that's one thing. But it's weird to start a conversation when both people know that you're going to get to this very specific thing.
how would you
Um,
feel about it if the publicist had said you couldn't ask that?
See that I'm okay with that. Sometimes I remember recently in a journalist group I was in, somebody was like, "How do you feel when publicists say you can't ask something?" And I was like, 9 times out of 10, it's either A, because the artist doesn't want to talk about it, or the publicist knows that they shouldn't talk about it, or B, they've been asked about it like 100 times,
Yeah.
and it's it's generally to your benefit to not ask that question. I remember Shane Told from Silverstein once told me, he was like, 99% of interviews are, so you started a band and then what happened? Or, so tell me how you got the name of your band. He's like, I just wish I could hand people a page and say, don't ask me these questions. I've already answered them 100 times.
Hmm.
So, like, my thing is always, if you are going into an interview, for starters, I don't take a lot of notes anymore because I've done a ton of interviews, but my general process is think about what I would want to ask that person. Like, what do I want to know about this person? Google the answers to those questions. And if you can't find it, that's a question that you're going to ask in your
Yeah.
interview. But if you can find the answer in a Google search, it does not need to be a part of your interview unless you use it as a building block to get to somewhere else. So, for example, if it's the case of Silverstein, you would say, oh, see, I know that you named your band after this, 20 years into your career. Do you think that was, how do you reflect on the decision to make your band name this? Like, did you think 20 years later you'd still have to be known as Silverstein around the world?
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. One of our viewers wants to know which episode of High Notes is your favorite.
Um, it's very tough. Personally, I always tell people to listen to the Anthony Green episode. Quick backstory: summer of 2019, Anthony Green. He's the lead singer of Circus Survive. He's a lead singer of Say Sin. He's in Sound of Animals Fighting. He's an established solo artist. He's on a solo tour. We're in the basement of the shelter in Detroit, Michigan. If you don't live in Michigan, that's where Eminem raps at the end of 8 Mile. That's the shelter. That's your cultural reference point. So we're in the green room, we're hanging out. He's doing push-ups. I'm just talking to him. We're friends. That's what we do when he's in town. And I'm trying to pitch an idea for a podcast that I'm trying to think of. And I'm like, I just want to do a limited series about a single topic. And he says, I think it'd be interesting to talk to musicians about drugs, just in general, like their relationship with drugs and music. And then I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. And then he's like, or what about if it was about quitting drugs? And I'd do that. Like I'd want to do that podcast. And I was like, that sounds cool. Yeah, that cool idea. But it's like a normal, just talking shit with your friends.
Yeah.
Nothing's really going to come of it. You're just spitballing. So fast forward to November of that year, and Anthony relapses, and he goes public with his relapse information. Like he shares it on Twitter and everything. And I'm texting him and I'm checking in on him, and really that's kind of like how I cut my teeth for high notes because my first text to him were like, oh my God, man, what's going on? Do you need anything? Blah, blah, blah. And then, sometimes he'd respond right away. Sometimes he'd respond, in a week. But literally every other day for probably 2 or 3 months straight, I just texted him Just, hey, thinking about you, checking in on you. Hope you're doing well. Just whatever, just nice thoughts,
Hmm.
basically. And at some point along the line, when he was responding to me and doing better, I jokingly said, "Well, now we have to do that podcast because clearly we need to talk about this." Um,
Yeah.
so his episode is kind of cool because it's rooted in like this is why we do the show is to share a story like this, a guy who's relapsed 3 times, who's a father with kids and is a full-time musician and is still struggling with this stuff, but is doing so in a public manner because a he knows that it comes out in his art and it impacts people in that way. They connect with it for that reason. But b he understands that he's in a power position of influence that he can use to do something good in the world, and that's ultimately what we would like to do. Beyond that, I think the season 2 episode with Eric from Hospital Bracelet is probably my other favorite episode, if only because they share stories that I didn't know about them going into it. It was one of the more twists and turns episode. And as a bonus pick, I always tell people Justin Furstenfeld from Blue October has the craziest stories. So if
Oh
you're somebody
yeah.
that's just like, if you're just into, if you just want the wild rock star lifestyle, the dream that you think of rock stars going over the edge with drugs, that episode has your answers in it. We have a
Wow.
few of those episodes, but Justin, like, he has a story about being strung out on crystal meth and calling the cops on himself, and all these other stories where you're just like 8-minute stories where I'm just silent and he's just like holding the stage like the front man that he is. And you don't have to be a fan of his music to love what he's saying, and he always like brings it home in a very educational way. So
I'm
those
a
are my
fan of
three
his
picks.
music. I worked with him when I was at Universal. He's a
Mm,
talented guy,
yeah.
and he's very honest and upfront, which is great. Um, so I want to ask you the basis upon which we've created this is what can publicists do better to make it easier for you to say yes?
That is a good question. Well, let me give you an example, and we'll tie it into high notes since we're already talking about high notes. So, in the fall of last year, my friend Kate, who works at Season of Mist, I'm terrible at pronouncing her last name, but she's the publicist of Season of Mist. She reached out to me and said, I have some artists that I would like to see on High Notes if you're interested. Now, the thing about Season of Mist is that they are a massively popular metal label, but they're mostly popular in Europe, and they deal with a lot of European death metal and dark metal rock bands that don't really fall in the general vicinity of what we cover on High Notes. But I love the idea, and it was so perfectly put together because it wasn't just one artist that she wanted to pitch. She wanted to pitch multiple artists, and she had a unique reason for why each one would be good for the show. And so what we decided to do instead, because it didn't work for the thing that what she pitched me for, but it led to us doing this thing that we're doing in February and March, which is a kind of mini season of the show that is all built around Season of Mist and this group of artists. So, I love when a publicist comes to me with a complete story that they want, like an idea of where they want the piece to go. Because the last thing I'm interested in as a writer is just hearing a song from a band that I don't care about and then writing some post about that song being out. Like that doesn't interest me. But if there's a storytelling opportunity there, that will get me to be a little bit more invested, especially if you already know what I do and you
Mm.
bring me something that plays into what I'm already doing. So, she knows that eventually I'm going to need more content for High Notes, and she has people that would be very good to be on High Notes. So pitching that with the purpose of fulfilling a need that I have as a creator is the perfect recipe for success versus today will not name the publicist because it didn't go well. But I get a promo invitation to a band that I've never heard of that just says opportunities available. Let me know if you want to do something. And I'm like, I don't. Do I like what?
Something.
How much work how much time do you think I have?
Right.
I have to be churning out things. I have to be figuring out what my next thing is, and if I have to go looking, as soon as I have to go looking for something, that's where you lose me 9 times out of 10, unless I really love the music.
Yeah. I mean, I think, especially if it's a band you've never heard of, that it's
Hmm.
important that the publicist, like, I have so many problems with that email that you got because, something, what is something? and
Mm-hmm.
do you want to? Well, if I ask you if you want to or not, you'd probably rather go home. You
Yeah,
know, it's not like you're
absolutely.
dying to sit there and write about some band. And I think if we
Mm-hmm.
think about each other as human beings and you know, not try and make work for people, but it was like with Amanda from Eva Under Fire. When you talked to her, there were a few different angles that you could approach it from, and that's the only reason why I pitched her to you. But I knew what you
Mm-hmm.
were doing, I knew how it would go, and I knew she would be great at
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's what makes somebody a good guest. It's just like it's the respect factor. So even as a writer, if I go to somebody and I want to cover something, I try not to come in just with my hands out being like, can I have access? It's like I try to come up with an exact pitch, because I coming from the journalist standpoint on it, if I want to work with somebody that I don't normally work with, or with a band that's maybe a little bit above my pay grade, so to say, I have a higher likelihood of success if I come A with analytics or B with a really clear pitch. And that's part of like what I love about High Notes is, I've been writing and covering bands for over a decade now. The
it.
last thing I want to do is spend 30 minutes talking about your new album with you, unless like there's a really cool story there. I mean, I do that still all the time, but if I'm choosing how I spend my time and how I'm expressing myself creatively, like I want to tell stories. Like that's ultimately what I love to do, whether it's my own or somebody else's. And so
Hmm.
I try to be like, this is the story I want to tell. Do you think that they would want to tell that story with me? And if the answer is no, it's like, fine, we'll just move on. And I'm not going to cover it in another way, not as an offense or like some like slam at that publicist or the artist for saying no, but it's like that's what my interest is the story that I'm trying to tell, or try to help you tell.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure before we wrap up that all your stuff, that people can find all the stuff that you're doing and talking about, especially High Notes. I see
Mm,
some people in chat are checking it out already. Someone
yes,
said, looking
thank
at
you.
season one interviewees, it's like looking at my iPod from high school.
Yeah,
So,
that's probably my iPod in high school too. Yeah, I mean, I'm 33, so yeah, there's it's that's another thing though. Like, if I had asked the guests on season one to do the interviews when I was in high school, even if I was this age, but in high school, they probably wouldn't, because I think back then, before social media was our general form of communication and the way that we engage with our audiences, I don't think artists would have been as open about it unless they had an album or a book to promote that addressed that topic. I could probably still get Brian from Korn because he wrote a whole book about it and a whole
yeah,
album about it. But somebody like Bert from The Used, who was really in the thick of it at the time, would have been, I bet the team probably would have thought that maybe it wasn't the best idea because they're trying to sell records to teenagers. But now Bert is 36 years old and Anthony is 36 years old, and they're still touring, they're still full-time musicians, and they have a different relationship with their fans because of how technology has brought us closer together in a lot of ways, but
yeah.
only to a certain depth. And hopefully the goal of the show is to explore a little bit deeper.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, I really feel like combining what you're doing with High Notes and I feel like it's really important that bands to some degree see themselves as role models, because there's
Mhm.
all these people who had them on their iPod in high school. And I think as you get older it gets easier for you. But I think it's important that people do good, and doing good matters. So
Yes, 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 it
but
does.
you enable that, and
Mhm.
you have a URL for High Notes so people know where to find it.
Yeah, so I always just tell people to go to our Twitter, which is twitter.com/high notes pod, high notes pod. We have a link tree. If you Google High Notes Pod, it usually comes up. I think we're the only podcast called High Notes, generally speaking. There's another one. They don't do a lot of episodes. They came around after us. It's fine. It's fine. Um, But High Notes is available on all platforms, including YouTube. So go anywhere, search High Notes podcast. It will most likely come up, and you can hear my voice. Can I tell you real quick? For I don't know what your time limit is, but you
Go ahead.
you know I agree, I'm with you where it's all about doing good, and that's important. But can I tell you what my struggle is recently that I
Yeah,
was going to
please.
bring up to you anyways? So I love doing all the things that I listed that I do and that I'll plug here at the end of the show. But I have a lot of friends, and I'm sure you have friends because we have the same community of people around
Yeah.
us who have either left music or are still in music and are pivoting to this world of coaching where they're like
Mm.
offering artist coaching or music professional coaching, and you can take their course, and it's a high level 4-figure investment for intensive training to be the best whatever creator entrepreneur that you want to be. And I see that as like a cool opportunity, but there's a part of my soul, and I talk about this at the at home all day long recently, where I can't justify doing that to somebody.
Nor
Like
can
I see
I.
people doing it and like making 5-figure, 6-figure incomes, and I'm like, I don't know that I don't feel confident in asking somebody for that just to give them advice that you and I learned from just doing it, or B, like any book, or C, any conference, or freely available anywhere.
They didn't
And
have music business programs at colleges when I went to school. So I did
mm,
communications and just cut class and
yeah,
went to the radio station. So,
yeah, that's all you need to do. Like I was like, I mean, I had someone email me last week about artist coaching, asking me if I would like talk to them on the phone. So we did like a 1 hour conversation. I listened to their story. I told them all of my tips and tricks are either on YouTube already or will be coming to YouTube soon for free. So
yeah,
I'm like walking them through, what a sales funnel is, what a marketing funnel is, how to start building a press list and all this. And at the end they're like, how much would it cost to just do this with you once a month until the album is out and have you like help us with stuff? And my brain kind of broke because I was like, is it really easier to give me money to tell you these things than to just go look at all of the stuff freely available on the internet? And I feel weird. I feel bad about it. I just don't know how it works. I don't know how you overcome that and be like, yes, I need $5,000 per month, and I will
yeah.
encourage you more. It's like that's my current struggle. Maybe I'll find a way to express that creatively at some point.
No,
But
I agree with that. I have a similar struggle because, and this is why I don't like being an indie publicist as opposed to in house somewhere.
mhm,
I have to charge people for my expertise. I have to. That's the way I make a living. But
yeah,
at the same time, some of this they can do themselves. And I tell them
hmm
that. If that's
hmm
something they can do themselves, I will tell them that. Like, I have a couple of favorite new bands that I've given advice to. I do it for free. I am like sucker all across my forehead. But, I can't justify taking money for it.
yeah.
And
I
I
don't know
always
how you do
put
it.
more of that into my PR campaign. So it's not PR really, it's more than that, but I call it PR for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean that is essentially what they're asking. But yeah, same as I think. And then when you do have to price it, like I could never just go fully independent because I feel like I underprice myself, not because I don't believe in myself, but because I'm like, it sounds ridiculous to me. Like I honestly was watching a former music publicist turned inspirational entrepreneurial coach on Instagram the other day, and they were talking about their new 3-month program that's they said high 4-figure investment, which is like a vague way of saying it's going to cost almost $10,000. And my brain was like, how are you, what are you all, I've known you my entire life. I know that you don't have something that I don't know that's worth $10,000.
Right, right,
And and the way that they pitch it, and I was like, I don't know if I can sell my soul like that. To me, that's selling out in 2021. Is like
right.
give me a ton of money to do something that most people will tell you for free.
Well, and also, and it's funny, my mother never understood what I did. And then my mother
Mm-hmm,
was sitting in my apartment when I was having a new client call. And I get off
mm-hmm.
the phone and she says, "Now I understand what you do for a living." And I go, "What do you understand it to be?" She said, "You're a con artist."
Yes.
And I'm like, did I really
Yeah,
sound
that's
that
how.
insincere? Because I'm sincere. And she was like, oh, no, you didn't sound insincere. It's just you're persuading, persuading, persuading. And I'm like, well, that's what my job is,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yes.
oh my God.
Almost the literal definition. Yeah,
Yeah,
but see, but the thing is like I don't know if once you reach that level of like getting 10 people to give you $9,000 for 3 month class that you have that kind of self-deprecation where you're like, I'm pretty much just a pusher of confidence at this point. Or if you just learn to be okay with that because the money is so good. I don't know. I don't know. I
We're
don't know
just
that I
not the
want to
kind of
find
people
out.
that can do it, James. Like
Yeah.
that's just the
There's some
bottom
things you
line.
just can't do. Yeah, it's a weakness that I'm okay with. So with that
Yeah.
in mind, if anyone watching this wants to learn about the music business and almost anything that somebody in that coaching position can tell you, you can go to youtube.com/musicbiz, music biz, or just search music biz on YouTube, and you will find my channel where there are hundreds, literally, videos of me sitting at this desk talking to people about how to make it in the music business, how to form press relationships, how to get your first job, whether or not you should go to college. We use a lot of business theory. This month has been kind of a focus. So we talk
Mm,
about things like Dunbar's number and Parkinson's law and the thousand fan theory, debunking them. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff there. So
wow, I
youtube.com
want to
slash
watch
music.
it. And I've been in the
Get
business
it from
25 years.
yeah, well, I try my best. Um, I was gonna say, it's growing very quickly. It's growing very nicely. I'm very happy with all the subscribers. But every now and then, especially this month, because we've done a video every single day as kind of a content experiment. What do people like? What do people not like? Um, I've gotten several comments from people that are like, "I love this channel, but I don't know why more people don't care." And I was like, "That's like telling a band, I love your band. Why isn't there anybody here?" Like, I don't know. Like, it's such like a strange, underhanded compliment that I
Yeah.
appreciate, but on some level, I'm like, you're highlighting the obvious that we're not ready to talk about. So, we got several thousand followers. We'd love to have more. High
Yes.
Notes is available everywhere. Like I said, season 2.5 mini season. I don't know what we're going to call it exactly. We'll be rolling it out officially soon. There'll be merchandise, and it all goes to support charities. It's a whole thing. Um, Inside Music, the other podcast, it's available everywhere as well. Just look up Inside Music Podcast. The video form is on the YouTube channel that I just mentioned. Uh, I run a job board. It's free. Anybody looking for a job in the music business, it's on haulixdaily.com. That's HAULIX daily.com. And of course, Haulix, the music industry's #1 promotional distribution platform, has free trials 1 month for any new artist, record label, or publicist. We have tons of clients, including BMG, Rise Records, Pure Noise, Hopeless, Fearless, and you can promote right alongside them with the exact same set of tools by going to haulix.com. Otherwise, if you want to find out what I'm up to, you look me up online, James Shotwell, jamesshotwell.com. I'm writing some band bios right now. I just wrote one for Islander if you want to see something I wrote recently. And this weekend, I am covering the Sundance Film Festival for Asheville Movies and Substream Magazine. So there'll be about 16 reviews from me coming out in the next
Wow.
7 days. So I've already done 4 of them. So it's not like every single I'm going to write every one as they happen. I've gotten a few screeners, but if you want to read me talking about movies, you can do that as well.
Wonderful. James, thank you so much for being a guest. And thank you all for being here and
Hmm.
listening. And if you, well, I put the Holics link in the chat, and we're wrapping. Thank you so much, and people in the chat are saying thank you, and
Thanks.
we will talk soon because I want to talk
I'll
season
come
3
back
again.
anytime.
Excellent,
I'm av-
excellent.
I'm
Thank you.
available.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Take care.